And we had an experience actually in Cape Town when we, in our court, had to deal with the expulsion of Mr. Mohammed, who had come from Dar es Salaam. Apparently he helped with the blowing up of the American embassy in Dar es Salaam. Terrible thing. I mean, something like 60, 70 people died, mostly Tanzanians, and it was a direct attack on international law, a symbol of international law. And he came to Cape Town under an assumed name, and he was 21, 22, he worked as a pastry chef. Apparently he was a very good pastry chef, very quiet person. And the FBI knew he was in Cape Town. They had a photograph, they didn't know his name. They waited for him in the immigration office, and one day he turned up, they pounced. The South African authorities were excited to be working with the FBI. They handed him over, and within 24 hours, he was flying in a military plane to the United States to stand trial for murder, capital charge. The baker who owned the premises in which he didn't know what was going on and came to court and said, this guy has been snatched. They wouldn't allow me to appoint a lawyer to look after him, and he's gone. The Cape High Court said, well, it's too late. He was an illegal immigrant anyhow. He had no rights to be here, and there's nothing we can do. The matter was taken on appeal by a human rights group to our court. We unanimously decided that the South African authorities had violated our constitution in two ways. The fact that he was liable for deportation wasn't an issue. He should have been extradited. What he did was intolerable, and our public authorities were under a duty to cooperate with the American authorities to ensure that he would be sent to face trial. But he should have been given the right to counsel. And the more serious the offence, the greater the need to have an entitlement to have counsel. And secondly, he shouldn't have been sent to the United States without a promise being given that if found guilty, he would not be executed. We've interpreted our constitution to make capital punishment a violation of the right to dignity and a violation of the prohibition against cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment and punishment. One of his co-conspirators in Germany was extradited following due process of law, and was extradited only after the American government had given an assurance that if found guilty, he would not be executed. But that was Germany, a first world country. You do things correctly. In our case, the term rendition was used, and we don't like the idea of rendition. We like the idea of due process of law, and it should apply throughout the world, everywhere. In any event, we wrote a fairly strong judgment of importance to our officials in future, not just to hand over in that way, and in terms of the morality of our country. And we sent the judgment to the trial judge for him to decide whether the jury should know or not, whether these factors were relevant. In the end, the jury split, I think 7-5. He wasn't executed, and that was in, I think, July 2001. If it had been in November 2001, I don't know what the decision would have been. Now, someone can say, well, it's okay for you judges in South Africa far away from these events. The fact is, bombs were going off at that time in Cape Town, and there was a group that was connected with extreme jihadist approach to law and life, that didn't recognize the new South African state, and that was campaigning in ways that involved murder and terrorism, blowing up bombs. They shot one of the investigating officers, they assassinated a magistrate. So it wasn't as though we were immune to all this. But what happened was a very well-planned campaign to isolate that group, socially and politically. That was fundamental. There might be some people here who knew my late colleague Dalla Omar, who was the first Minister of Justice, did a lot of anti-apartheid campaigning. throughout the world, and he stayed in one of the areas in which this particular group drew its support. He refused to move. He stayed there deliberately to say that we represent the new non-racial democracy that doesn't give a hegemony to any particular faith or belief. And there was good intelligence, and some people said we're going to need attention without trial, we have to get limitations on our constitution. None of that was tried. Using the ordinary methods of good police investigation, political isolation, the group were found, the leaders were sent to jail, and the bombing stopped. And I think that's one of the dangers of using these public measures that look good. You appear to be doing something, but the people who are doing the real work just go deeper underground. The sense of martyrdom becomes intensified, and you feel you're cutting off the head, but many more heads sprout. And so, to my mind, the real answer, I'd say in my country, I won't give advice to any other country, is good intelligence gathering, good politics, sensitive understanding politics, marginalizing the groups in a political sense, not simply through abuse and denunciation. We were called every name under the sun when we were fighting freedom, but in a way that's convincing to the communities from which they come. Getting the community and the public on your side in a meaningful way, particularly the section of the public from which they want to draw their strength. If you behave in a crass way, if it looks as though every Muslim becomes a target, every dark-skinned person can be traced onto the underground and shot, then you are in fact creating a climate in which they can function better. It's a tricky balance to be maintained, but I think it's an absolutely, absolutely vital one.